What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars steps into the world of high-speed racing? When Vin Diesel, known for his role in the Fast and Furious franchise, faces a legendary racer, David Pearson, on a wet racetrack in North Carolina, the results are more than just a race. It's a battle for respect, identity, and redemption. In this story, you'll witness the clash of egos, the rain-soaked determination, and the unforgettable moment that changed everything. But who will walk away victorious? Rain on Charlotte Speedway. The rain had been falling since dawn, soaking the grandstands and turning the Charlotte Motor Speedway into a slick ribbon of asphalt. Water beaded off carbon fiber spoilers, rolled across the visors of helmets, and ran down the shoulders of the man standing silently at the edge of pit lane. Vin Diesel, clad in a dark leather jacket soaked in rain. His expression was calm, but his eyes, those eyes, studied everything. The sound of the engines, the curves of the track, the subtle arrogance in how others looked at him, as if he didn't belong, as if he were just an actor playing pretend in a real man's world. "Mr. Diesel!" a young blonde CNN reporter called out, rushing toward him, microphone in hand. "Are you here researching a new role, or just visiting for fun?" Vin offered a soft smile, not mocking, not defensive. "I came to learn, and to listen to speed." "That's poetic for an action star," she said, half laughing. He didn't reply. He stepped closer to pit lane where a thunderous V8 snarled beneath a silver hood. Technicians buzzed around it. Reporters scribbled notes. And no one expected him to know the language of torque, traction, and thunder. Then a silver blur sliced through the rain. A car skidded slightly as it rolled to a stop, mist trailing from its wheels. The door flung open. Out stepped David Pearson, NASCAR legend, three-time national champion, the man they called the Southern Thunder. Rain clung to his salt and pepper hair. His eyes were cool steel. When they landed on Vin, a slow, crooked smile spread across his face. Well, look what Hollywood dragged in." The air tensed. A few reporters chuckled quietly, then stopped. Vin didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. "Not here for autographs," Vin said evenly, "just observing." Pearson strode forward until he stood face to face with him. His voice was low and rumbling. "You may have played a wheelman on screen, but out here, kid, out here, a wrong turn doesn't get reshot. It buries you. I don't need retakes to respect death." "Respect?" Pearson raised a brow. "I've seen actors lose control in simulations. Try controlling a stock car at 190 on a wet track. It ain't about looking cool. It's about living to see the next lap." "Then let me see it." Vin locked eyes with him. "I came here to understand, not pretend." A hush fell over the pit area as the two men stood locked in silence. Photographers moved in. The wind carried the sound of a crew chief barking orders somewhere in the background. Then, a reporter broke the tension. "Mr. Pearson, do you think Vin Diesel has what it takes to drive out here, even as a guest?" Pearson scoffed. His voice cut like a blade. "He's got muscles for movie posters, sure. Maybe even the guts to slide around in a green screen studio. But on this track, all I see is a performance, not a driver." Vin turned slightly, letting the words hang in the wet air. He stared out at the glistening track. Slick, unpredictable, dangerous. Then he faced the cameras. "I didn't come here to prove I'm a driver," he said. His voice was calm, unshaken. "I came to remind people that underestimating someone is often their biggest mistake." Pearson crossed his arms, amused. "So, what are you saying, Hollywood?" Vin stepped forward, now just inches from him. One lap. Tomorrow. Me and you. In the rain. Reporters gasped. A camera clicked. The pit lane exploded in murmurs. Pearson laughed, but his laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Vin held his stare. "And I don't need a script to write the ending." Into the storm. The track was soaked. The clouds bruised and heavy above. Thunder echoing faintly in the distance like distant applause waiting for a show. The announcer's voice crackled through the rain-speckled loudspeakers as Vin Diesel stepped into the cockpit of a custom-built stock car, a beast of steel and speed foreign to movie sets, but familiar in spirit. Across from him, David Pearson adjusted his gloves, gaze slicing through the haze with the arrogance of a man who believed he had nothing left to prove. But even arrogance trembles when faced with a question it never thought it would have to answer. What if you're wrong? Vin wasn't here for show. He didn't need stuntmen, didn't bring a PR team, and refused interviews. He sat in that car with only one thing in his mind: drive. The green light blinked, and the engine screamed in response. Metal thunder shot forward, tires screaming against the rain-slicked track, each driver a blur of instinct and adrenaline. Pearson took the lead immediately, sharp, calculated, testing Vin's presence like a veteran pressing a rookie's chest for weakness. But Vin didn't flinch. Every turn was a dialogue, every straight a statement. Pearson began to push harder, realizing this wasn't some actor mimicking motion. It was a man speaking fluently in a language he wasn't supposed to know. The rain grew heavier, visibility thinner, but Vin became sharper. He didn't fight the storm. He bent with it. His movements weren't pretty. They were primal. He braked with fury, turned with resolve, and accelerated with something deeper than pride. Lap after lap, Pearson's confidence began to slip. Not because he was losing, but because he couldn't shake Vin. And deep down, a voice whispered that this wasn't supposed to happen. The audience felt it too. Silence crept through the crowd between roars, a realization blooming in thousands of minds. This wasn't a fluke. It was a man reclaiming something stolen long ago by assumption, by judgment, by mockery. As the final lap neared, Pearson glanced in his rearview mirror, and Vin was right there, eyes locked forward, untamed, unshaken, inevitable. The turn that changed everything. The rain had turned relentless, a curtain of silver hammering the track as the final lap began. The world seemed to narrow into a single thread of fate, winding through the storm, and on that thread danced two machines, two men, two destinies. David Pearson, teeth clenched, hands firm on the wheel, was pushing his car to the limit, desperate not to lose control, not of the car, but of the moment. Behind him, Vin Diesel's breath was slow, synced with every heartbeat of the engine. He didn't chase. He stalked. Each second was a symphony of pressure, a reminder that legacy doesn't belong to those who had it easy. It belongs to those who took every sneer and built a fortress with it. Then it happened. The curve. The one spot on the track that history remembered for crashes and miracles alike. Pearson slid in hot, barely correcting the skid, tires kissing the edge of danger. But Vin leaned into it with terrifying grace. He didn't brake. He trusted the chaos, and the chaos made way. His car glided through the corner like a storm cutting through clouds, passing Pearson in a move so surgical, so undeniable, that for a breathless moment, even the storm forgot to fall. The crowd exploded, no longer divided between moviegoers and racers, but unified in awe. Pearson stared ahead, disbelief tightening his throat. The man he called a fraud had just rewritten the laws of physics and pride in a single move. Vin crossed the finish line first. Not by luck, not by chance, but by sheer force of will. He pulled off his helmet, steam rising from his body like smoke from a battlefield. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, once, to the storm, to the track, to every doubt he'd buried beneath his silence. Pearson parked beside him, chest heaving, stepping out slowly. He walked toward Vin, eyes no longer hard, voice no longer sharp, and with cameras flashing, reporters breathless, and the rain still whispering the truth, David Pearson extended his hand. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "You're not just a driver. You're a storm in human form." And Vin, with calm steel in his eyes, shook his hand. Not as a man seeking validation, but as one who had already earned it, on his own terms, in full view of a world that would never doubt him again. The legend rewritten. The next 48 hours were a storm Vin Diesel hadn't braced for, not of weather, but of attention. The race had been meant as a private challenge, a gesture of self-respect, but it ignited something larger than pride. It became a national moment, from New York to Los Angeles, from race fans to critics who once mocked him as a glorified stuntman. The headlines transformed overnight. From Hollywood to hero, Vin Diesel defies the odds. Pearson shakes hands with the future. Videos of the soaked handshake flooded every social media feed. Hashtags like #DieselEarnedIt and #NotJustAnActor trended globally. Late-night talk shows played clips of the final lap. Analysts slowed down the footage to milliseconds, praising his courage on turn 3, admiring the exact angle he took on the slick final corner. Racing veterans who once chuckled at his name were now forced to admit, on record, that what Vin had done wasn't luck or bravado. It was real. But for Vin, none of it mattered as much as the moment after the race, back in the locker room. He sat alone, towel around his neck, the roar of the crowd still echoing in his bones. For years he'd heard the whispers. He was too muscular, too scripted, too polished. They said he couldn't really drive, that Fast and Furious was choreography, not courage. They said he played legends, but would never be one. And now, all of it had melted in a single lap. But what stuck with him wasn't the victory. It was the look in Pearson's eyes when he said, "You earned the track." That moment had weight. It wasn't applause, it was recognition. It was history nodding to a man who refused to be boxed in. The media storm raged on. ESPN invited him for a sit-down interview. Sports Illustrated offered the cover. Car and Driver called the Monte Carlo a beast reborn. He declined the cover shoots, the interviews, the commercials that flooded in. He didn't want to become a product. He wanted to remain a symbol of something different. A man who stepped onto sacred ground, not to perform, but to prove that identity is never fixed by fame. It's forged in fire, under pressure, in the rain. And Pearson, surprisingly, didn't disappear. 2 days after the race, he invited Vin for a private breakfast. No cameras, just black coffee, eggs, and honesty. "You've changed the way I look at people," Pearson said, quietly, slicing into toast like he was still navigating a curve. "We come from different worlds, Diesel, but what you showed me, it's not about background. It's about heart. I disrespected yours. I won't make that mistake again." They didn't speak long after that. They didn't need to. Mutual respect, once earned in battle, doesn't require many words. In the weeks that followed, a new wave of drivers, young, fearless, diverse, began citing Vin as their inspiration. Not because he was a racer by trade, but because he challenged the narrative. He became proof that reputations can be rewritten, not by shouting louder, but by doing the impossible in silence and letting truth echo. Vin returned to his films, but something had changed in his eyes. He was no longer pretending. Every gear shift he acted, every racing scene he filmed afterward, carried the imprint of that day in the rain. He'd driven against a titan and carved his name into the track without needing approval. His truth had been spoken in the roar of the engine, the burn of the tires, and the stillness that followed the finish line. The road bends to will. Weeks passed. The world moved on, as it always does, chasing newer stories, fresher flames. But for Vin Diesel, something within had shifted permanently. He had felt the weight of eyes that doubted, had walked alone into a world not built for him, and left with more than victory. He left with validation that needed no microphone. Fame had never been his aim. Respect, not for the name, but for the journey behind it, was what he chased in silence. And on that wet racetrack in North Carolina, under the gray thunder of skies, he had found it. The producers back in Hollywood noticed something different. His presence on set was sharper, quieter, more deliberate. When cameras rolled, his eyes no longer acted. They revealed. In every gear shift and driving scene, in every long stare across a hood, he no longer mimicked speed. He embodied it. No one spoke of the race, but everyone felt the ghost of it in his performances. He didn't bring the track to the screen. He brought the fire he'd found within himself, and that changed everything. One night, months later, during a film premiere in New York, a reporter asked him, "Vin, what was that race really about?" He paused. The red carpet lights flickered like distant lightning. He looked beyond the crowd, as if searching the sky for the answer. "It wasn't about winning," he said. "It was about rewriting the sentence people already decided for me. It was about telling the world, I don't live in your box. I build my own roads." Meanwhile, David Pearson quietly announced his retirement from the public eye. He didn't vanish, but he let the new generation take center stage. And in his final interview, he uttered a line that would be remembered just as long as any race he ever ran. "I met a man I misjudged, and he outran my ego. That's the fastest thing I've ever seen on any track." The quote was etched on the wall of the National Racing Museum beside a photo of the two men shaking hands in the rain. Vin never wore a racing suit again. He didn't have to. The suit, the wheel, the storm, it had already done its work. What remained now was the legacy, not of a racer, not even of a movie star, but of a man who walked into a world that laughed in his face and answered not with anger, but with excellence. He didn't just prove himself. He showed everyone watching that identity is not assigned. It's claimed, lap by lap, word by word, act by act. And so, in the hearts of those who saw that rainy day unfold, not just the children on the bleachers, not just the veterans who once laughed, but even the skeptics glued to the screen, Vin Diesel became more than a name. He became a signal fire. A reminder that greatness doesn't beg for permission. It arrives uninvited, unapologetic, and unforgettable.